Hey guys, I want to make a video about boundaries and the importance of having boundaries. This is an updated video because I felt like there was so much more information that I could give and pour in about this topic. And this topic is so important and so dear to me because it is one of the biggest life lessons I have learned, and it has been one of the most amazing tools that I have utilized on my pathway to healing and has brought me a long ways spiritually, emotionally, and mentally, and physically too. So let's discuss boundaries. And in order to establish boundaries, we need to understand their purpose. Boundaries protect us spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and physically at times. Having boundaries shows not only the world how we see ourselves, but shows ourselves how we see ourselves. That may not make sense, but if you take a moment and you think about it, think about how you live your life day to day. How do you see yourself? If you see yourself in a low self-esteem, then you pour out that energy of low self-esteem to the world. And low self-esteem attracts predators, manipulators, and downright toxic people. So if you want a life free of toxic people and toxic things and relationships, first step is having boundaries. I will make a whole other video on how to remove and purify yourself of toxic things, toxic people, and toxic relationships. But for now, we need to talk about the first building block, the foundation to have that pure life. And that is boundaries. So oftentimes our boundaries are skewed due to emotional, mental, verbal, or sexual trauma. Any time that a person is traumatized, verbally, mentally, emotionally, physically, sexually, whatever it is, that taps into their subconscious. Now, the subconscious is neither good nor bad, because subconscious merely is. It is a part of our mind where it stores information and it's like quiet, but yet it pours out into other aspects of our mind. And the subconscious actually has so much to do with how we live our day-to-day lives. We operate at a portion of our brain, and it tells us to get up, wake up, communicate with others, whatever. We have this portion of our brain that we most likely think of when we think of how our brain operates in regards to how we live our day-to-day life. But there's that subconscious part, which actually is like this man behind the scenes, which really has a huge impact in how we live our day-to-day and how we interact with others and ourselves. So when somebody is traumatized, let's say emotionally or mentally brought down or attacked verbally or whatever, any kind of trauma, it doesn't have to be a super big trauma, it doesn't have to be a super little trauma. Trauma is trauma. We're not talking about scales here, we're simply talking about the fact of, is a certain part of us emotionally, mentally, physically, sexually being traumatized or not? So trauma is a way of picking at our boundaries without us realizing it. So this may have happened to you early on in life, and most likely it has, where you were in one way or another traumatized. And we are born as pure beings. We are born with a natural sense of what is right and wrong. But when early on in life, something goes against what our natural beliefs are about how things operate, if something happens against our natural instated boundaries, that chips away at us. And it taps into our subconscious and lets our subconscious believe, this is what I deserve. This is all that I am going to get in life. This is the maximum amount of goodness that I can receive, or I don't receive enough goodness. I'm not supposed to receive enough goodness in this area, or this area. So basically, it just comes down to picking away at your subconscious, saying, this is all that I deserve. And so when the subconscious absorbs that information, I'm not saying that the information is correct. No, it is not. But because our boundaries in one way or another were violated in the first place without us even realizing it, it tapped into our subconscious. So our subconscious absorbed that energy, that message, and imprinted itself. So in the back of our minds, as we grow and progress and go into new situations, we think subconsciously, oh, this is what I deserve. This is how I am supposed to operate. This is the type of behavior I am supposed to accept, whether I like it or not. So once we realize what causes us to have issues with instating boundaries in the first place, we have to realize that our boundaries were violated one way or another through whatever kind of trauma. Doesn't even matter the amount of trauma. Something was there that broke down our natural instated boundaries. And once we realize that, let's take a look at our subconscious. And if you really focus, it may take you a while. It may not come to you all at once, but if you really focus on how your mind operates and you look at the patterns in your life of, oh, okay, let's say a certain relative was always mean to me and causing issues and like just saying awful things about my weight. Then later on, when you're dating somebody who has that same energy that you're familiar with growing up, and let's say this person's a toxic person and they make a comment about your appearance or your weight, your subconscious is like, yeah, I deserve to be treated that way. I deserve to feel this way about food. Or, let's say you have a manipulative individual in your life early on and they are saying awful things to you and just degrading you emotionally or whatever and saying you're not good enough. And later on you have a boss who says, oh, your work isn't good enough. What's wrong with you or whatever. Your subconscious is like, oh, yeah, this is exactly the kind of behavior that I am supposed to accept. This is okay. I don't deserve anything beyond this. And here's the crazy part is that your subconscious, because it believes that these behaviors, these actions are okay due to the trauma that you were exposed to, it will go out, your subconscious will go out and you will subconsciously put yourself in situations where your boundaries are continually violated. And that goes into the cycle of continuing to have toxic relationships and toxic things in your life. But like I said, that is in a whole other video. So once I described the importance of boundaries and how boundaries were instated within us in the first place, whether these boundaries were really poor and not strong at all, now we can talk about how to break these boundaries. First of all, realize the problem. Realize poor boundaries are issues with your subconscious due to whatever trauma you endured at whatever point in your life. Normally it's early on in life. No matter the amount of trauma, it was there. And that picked away at your boundaries. And once you look at that, then you can start looking inside and look at your self-worth. Look at the galaxies. Look at the universe. Look at the bigger picture. Look at the fact that you are like one grain of sand in the whole galaxies. That may sound really bad, like, oh no, we're only a grain of sand, but no. The amount of elements that have to come together for you to be alive, the sperm meets the egg, the right time of the month for ovulation, for you to come into existence, come into being, to be born on a planet that has the natural resources in place to sustain human life. You survived. Look at all the atoms in your body. You are your own entity. You were created by whatever source is out there, but you were created and you have a purpose. Once you realize your value by just existing with all of these elements coming into play, you realize, oh my gosh, in a whole universe and galaxies, I am a single entity. I am a grain of sand, but I exist. So many elements came into play to create my being. The sperm meets the egg, the ovulation, the elements that keep Earth sustaining life. All of these come into play. Now, this may sound super spiritual of like, oh, wow. But what I'm really trying to do is get you outside of yourself and look at the bigger picture. Because once you step outside of yourself and you look at the bigger picture, then you are able to look within yourself because you realize how you relate. You realize your place in this earth. And the beautiful part of that is you have importance by just existing. By just existing. You are enough. Once you realize your value, then you can realize the second part, which is so important. Realize that you are in control of your quality of life. How good it is or how bad it is, you are in control of it. Now, there's certain situations where somebody is being trapped or abused or oppressed, and I'm not talking about those certain situations. And if you are in a certain situation where you are being trapped, abused, and oppressed, then you need to reach out and get help. But what I am talking about is for the majority of your life, we have control over the quality of it. And then realize the importance, the value of your life, not just your place in the world and that you are enough by simply existing, but realize your value in your life. Realize the value of your life. You only have one life on this earth. We can talk about reincarnation and past lives, and that can be in a whole other video. But even if past lives exist, this is the life you are living now. This is its own single entity, this life that we are living in this present moment. So when we think about the life we have, and if there are past lives, we won't remember this life for the most part. But that's, again, a whole other video about past lives. But really just focus on your life and think about, what kind of life do I want? What kind of life do I feel that I would want in order to feel more enriched? Is it helping others? Is it going to the beach? Is it surfing? Is it exploring education? Is it researching? Is it, whatever it is? Tap into that and realize that you and your life must be more connected. You must take personal responsibility in your life. And by having that, then you are starting to establish your own life. Once you get to that point where you realize, I don't want any drama or any darkness in my life, to the best of my ability. If you simply want a good life and you simply say, I want a good life, I am a good person, I choose to be a good person, I choose to find enjoyment and pleasure and satisfaction out of living, those are the first steps. And then once you have those foundations of realizing your value, realizing the value of your life, and then you realize that you want to improve the quality of your life because you deserve to have an improved quality of life, then it's time to start establishing the boundaries. And I tell you, once you tell the universe or your higher source of light or God, whatever it is that you believe in, that you want a better life and you want to have stronger boundaries, certain situations will start popping up where you can start practicing having boundaries. And it's really interesting to see. Once you put out into the universe that you want to have stronger boundaries to improve your quality of life, you're going to get some tests. I hate to use the word test, you'll get opportunities to practice having boundaries. When I started to say to the universe or my source of light that I wanted to have stronger boundaries, I got put in situations where I had to deal with really unpleasant people. And it was even small stuff like me going to the store and having somebody try to cut in front of me in line, or being at a coffee shop and somebody being rude to me, or just people in general acting inappropriately, like men coming up and asking for my number and being really persistent and aggressive about asking for my number. It was like these opportunities where I could practice having boundaries. And I want to reiterate it. Having boundaries does not mean that you have to be mean or nasty or snarky. No, I don't believe us as humans are supposed to be mean, nasty, and snarky. But there's that difference of having boundaries and still being a loving and kind individual. Here is a prime example of having boundaries. When I went to a certain location once a week, I saw a homeless man always begging. I offered to give him food before offering to give him money, like I always do. He would always opt for money, saying that he needed to buy a bus pass. So week 4 comes along, and mind you, I'm seeing that, he's asking other people. I finally asked, how much is a bus pass? And he stated the amount, and I said, I've given you about half of that. And I've seen you ask others for money also. So I know logically he has had the money to buy a bus pass, and he simply ended the conversation, didn't say anything, and just went away. That is an example. I had to deal with a woman who was really awful to me on a consistent basis. I had to deal with her. She was rude, she was nasty, and I had tried to communicate with her, hey, how can we improve our communication styles? And she would have none of it. So one day she tries to cut me off. She says something to me that was out of line, and I've always been respectful to her. And I said, okay, well, I hear your words. Now let me speak. And she tried to cut me off, and I said, no, I have heard you speak. You will let me speak. You will treat me with human decency and respect, and we will continue this conversation. See, I was establishing boundaries without being rude, without saying nasty words or putting out darkness or dark energy into the world. Having boundaries protects us. Oftentimes, I was on dates with guys in my youth years, where I didn't have good boundaries, meaning that if a guy put his arm around me during a movie and I felt uncomfortable by it, I would say nothing. Or, other stuff. And I would say nothing because my boundaries had been violated. I thought it was okay because my subconscious believed it. So then, recently, I was at a dance and I was dancing with somebody who had asked me to dance. And this individual tried to put their hands on my waist. And I had my boundaries and I moved their hands quickly away from my waist. And I kept dancing. They asked for a second dance and I smiled and I politely said no thank you and I left. See how I was firm? I established my boundaries. And I was true to myself because I respected my own boundaries. And therefore, by doing that, I started showing the world what kind of behavior I would accept in my life and what kind of behavior I wouldn't accept in my life. I know a certain addict who would continually ask me for money. And I would continually give them money because I thought this person was in recovery. And then I found out that this person was not in recovery, so I told them, this is the last time I am giving you money, due to the fact that I have heard from several sources that you continually use this money for stuff other than food. So this will be the last time I give you money. I established my boundary while still being a loving and kind person. And I just want to give these examples, not to get too personal or private about my life, but just to let you know the importance of having boundaries and how you can start practicing having boundaries. Go out in public, and if somebody starts to treat you rudely, be kind. If you want to, I suggest being kind because I feel like pouring out love and kindness is important, but still be firm. I was at an auto mechanic shop and they tried to charge me more than what we had agreed upon. And I said, no, this is the amount we agreed upon. This is the amount we discussed. I will pay the amount that we discussed. And I was just really firm about it, but I was still polite. So once you start pouring out your boundaries, you start changing your energy. And the more you practice having boundaries, after you pass the opportunities, after you meet the opportunities presented to you by the universe or your higher source of light on how to practice having boundaries, after you've gotten that down pretty well, you're going to start attracting better things into your life. If you attract awful, toxic relationships, once you start having boundaries, you're going to stop attracting those many awful, toxic relationships. Now, don't get me wrong. For a while, when you are practicing having your boundaries, the universe, God, whatever, will send you many opportunities, aka times where you need to execute having boundaries or you need to practice having boundaries. But then, as you have boundaries, you're purifying your life. You purify your life from toxic things, toxic people, toxic situations. And that improves your quality of life. And that, by improving your quality of life, helps you emotionally, mentally, verbally, and physically, because the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual elements of our lives are all woven together. But again, that is in a different video. So I just wanted to make this video about boundaries and the importance of having them and how to have them and how to maintain them. How to maintain boundaries is simply to remember your worth, meditate, and look at things critically and think, is this a time where I need to execute, aka practice having boundaries, or not? And if it is, then be true to yourself and respect yourself and have those boundaries, because how you treat yourself is how others treat you. You teach others how to treat you. You put your own price tag on yourself. People will buy you at the value you put upon yourself. And I don't like to use that expression, but it's the only one that comes to mind, which is merely a way of saying you're going to attract the energy. People will mimic your energy. So you're going to attract the energy that you put in yourself, if that makes any sense. To me, it does. I'm trying to describe it. the way you view yourself is simply the way others are going to view you. And that is a law and a fact of life. Okay? So remember your worth, remember your value, remember the value of your life, the importance of it, and how to purify and improve the quality of your life by having boundaries. Remember your value, remember what you allow in your world. Okay? All right, well, I love you all. Peace out. Remember to like and subscribe for more videos.